Alexander Barnes, a man born into privilege and molded by immeasurable wealth, believed he had everything under control. He was engaged to a woman he deemed a simple villager, a quiet, modest soul named Liana Ramirez, whom he rescued from obscurity. Or so he thought. But the gentle glimmer in her eyes masked a secret so powerful that it could shatter the entire foundation of Alexander's world. Whispers of betrayal, shocking twists, and heart-stopping revelations soon threatened to tear everything apart. Little did Alexander know that Liana's hidden identity would not only turn his life upside down, but challenge every notion he held about love and loyalty. Alexander Barnes was raised in a gleaming high-rise penthouse in the heart of Manhattan, heir to a long-standing family enterprise known as the Barnes Conglomerate. He had grown up with private tutors, attended prestigious schools, and rubbed shoulders with the sons and daughters of politicians, movie stars, and captains of industry. His father, Gerald Barnes, had retired early after amassing his fortune, leaving Alexander to take over the reins of the family empire at a remarkably young age. But for all his refinement and the shimmering success stories pinned to his name, Alexander was profoundly restless. At 29, he felt suffocated by the relentless pace of business deals, the perpetual spotlight, and even the endless parade of social engagements. He longed for authenticity, a hidden corner of the world that was real, unvarnished, and alive with simple joys. This yearning led him to retreat on a much-needed vacation, a small village nestled in the Andean highlands of Colombia. The location was suggested by his trusted friend and fellow adventurer, Christopher Barnes' no-blood relation, but a college roommate who shared the same last name by coincidence. Christopher had recently worked with an international non-profit and fell in love with the area's raw beauty. Alexander, desperate for an escape from Manhattan's constant demands, seized the opportunity. He arrived in the village San Rafael, by name under the blazing sun of early summer. Rugged mountains framed the sky, dotted with lush greenery and misty clouds clinging to the peaks. Dirt roads wound through the valley, leading to brightly colored homes and market stalls stacked with vibrant produce. For a man used to designer suits and chauffeured Bentleys, the rustic simplicity was both jarring and strangely comforting. Alexander intended to stay just a week, two, at most, until he rediscovered his center and returned to the empire awaiting him. Little did he know, fate had other plans. On his second day in San Rafael, Alexander wandered through a local festival honoring the village's patron saint. As children chased each other under paper decorations, traditional music resounded through the square, and the air was filled with the aroma of grilled corn and warm empanadas. Alexander, dressed casually in jeans and a crisp white shirt, no hint of his wealthy background about him, observed with curiosity. That was when he first caught sight of Liana Ramirez. She was tending a small stall selling handmade woven shawls, each piece detailed with intricate patterns of local ancestry. The deep brown of her hair shimmered in the sun, while her hazel eyes, simultaneously warm and distant, seemed to hold an entire world of unspoken truths. An elderly villager, Senora Ruiz, introduced her to Alexander, explaining that Liana made many of the shawls herself to support her grandfather. Intrigued by her quiet poise, Alexander strolled over to talk. Liana greeted him with a polite but guarded smile. At first, she seemed unimpressed by his presence, something Alexander was not used to. Most people showered him with attention the moment they discovered his last name. But here, in this remote village, he was simply Alexander, a newcomer trying to figure out how to pay for arpas in Colombian pesos. There was a unique confidence in her demeanor that immediately drew him in. She had a poised grace, an ease with which she engaged the world around her. They talked about the weaving tradition in her family, about the significance of the patterns, and how each color told a story of heritage, community, and resilience. In those moments, as the music swelled and the festival crowd surged and receded. Alexander found in Liana something he had seldom encountered among Manhattan's socialites: genuineness. A flicker of something more, an inexplicable attraction sparked to life, though both remained too polite to acknowledge it outright. In the following days, Alexander found himself returning time and time again to Liana's stall, drawn by her quiet warmth and the sense of calm she radiated. They bonded over local coffee, brewed strong enough to knock city slickers off their feet, sat by a nearby stream to watch the setting sun, and strolled through the village outskirts, discussing everything from local folklore to the meaning of family. She was refreshingly candid, revealing how she and her grandfather had lived alone since her parents' death a decade earlier in a tragic accident. Whenever Alexander tried to pry into her background beyond the village, Liana artfully changed the subject. She teased him about his tall tales of corporate boardrooms and first-class flights, unable to fully picture that life. Alexander, for his part, felt free in a way he'd never experienced. Here, no one recognized him as the empire's heir, and for the first time, he was not defined by the overwhelming weight of his legacy. As the days slipped by, the conversation grew more personal. Alexander admitted that despite his success, he was often lonely, haunted by the suspicion that people were drawn to his wealth and status rather than who he was. Liana listened kindly, her eyes empathetic, but kept her own secrets close. Even so, an emotional bond formed. On the last night of his stay, while the moon shone bright over the village, Alexander found himself unable to board the plane back to New York the following morning. Instead, in a moment of impassioned spontaneity, he asked Liana if she would consider coming back to the United States with him. Though shocked by the proposal from a man she had known just a short while, Liana surprisingly agreed, but only if she could bring her grandfather along, and only if she remained free to visit the village as she saw fit. Friends back in Manhattan were astonished. Gerald Barnes was skeptical, suspecting that this poor villager was a gold digger drawn to his son's fortune. But Alexander, starry-eyed and defiant, refused to listen to objections. He arranged for Liana and her grandfather, Manuel Ramirez, to live comfortably in a luxurious guest suite at the Barnes family estate. 2 weeks later, Alexander dropped a bombshell. He and Liana would be married in a month's time. The announcement took high society by storm. Tabloids buzzed with speculation. Who was this mysterious Colombian woman who had stolen the heart of one of New York's most eligible bachelors? Was she a schemer, an adventuress, or simply the luckiest woman in the world? Liana, unaccustomed to the glare of cameras and the razor-edged whispers of social scrutiny, tried her best to remain composed. She dedicated time to philanthropic endeavors, visiting homeless shelters, volunteering in local clinics. Alexander admired her sincerity. Her modest dresses contrasted sharply with the designer gowns flaunted by New York's socialites, and her soft-spoken nature cut through the city's relentless noise. Over dinner parties and charity galas, rumors continued swirling. More than a few society ladies attempted to corner Liana and interrogate her about her past. She evaded their prying eyes, rarely offering more than a gentle smile. Alexander, for his part, was enthralled by her authenticity. All he saw was a virtuous woman who was neither impressed by his wealth nor overawed by the status he carried. In between hectic business deals, he tried to teach her about his world, while she, in return, showed him the value of humility and thoughtful reflection. Despite this unity, tensions were brewing just below the surface. Not everyone wished the young couple well. Josephine Caldwell, a longtime friend and past romantic interest of Alexander's, had always dreamt of becoming the new Miss S. Barnes. She had an inflated sense of entitlement, believing that her upper-crust pedigree made her a more suitable match. Determined to expose Liana's scheming ways, Josephine hired a private investigator to dig into Liana's background. If there were any dark skeletons or hidden motives, Josephine wanted to bring them to light before the wedding. At the same time, across the ocean in Europe, An influential figure was also investigating Liana's whereabouts, none other than Santiago Beltran, a renowned Colombian businessman long rumored to have wide-reaching political connections. Santiago's staff had scoured the globe in search of a missing individual, guided by cryptic leads about a young woman with a unique family heirloom. Unbeknownst to Alexander, Liana's old life contained a web of secrets, far more intricate than anyone could have imagined. As the wedding date approached, Josephine's private investigator reported that Liana was indeed from San Rafael, but details of her lineage appeared suspiciously absent from local records. Town officials recalled that Liana's grandfather had once changed their last name many years ago, though no one seemed to know why. The deeper the investigator dug, the murkier Liana's background became. Instead of fueling Josephine with an easy scandal, the puzzle only heightened the sense that something monumental lurked beneath the surface. The grand wedding was set to take place in the Barnes family's private estate in Connecticut, an expansive property boasting manicured gardens, a centuries-old chapel, and a grand ballroom decorated with crystal chandeliers. Every last detail was meticulously arranged, from the Belgian lace on Liana's wedding gown to the curated guest list of foreign dignitaries, celebrities, and top-tier socialites. Secretly, Alexander hoped that his mother's treasured wedding ring, passed down through generations, would signify Liana's acceptance by the Barnes family. Yet, tension ran high. Gerald Barnes watched his son carefully, still not fully convinced that Liana was anything other than a sweet-faced opportunist. Journalists and paparazzi circled like vultures, hungry for a slip-up that could make headlines. Meanwhile, Josephine Caldwell refined her plan, determined to reveal her discovery at the worst possible moment. Liana herself seemed oddly nervous in the final week before the wedding. She spent long hours locked in the estate's library, poring over old records and making calls in hushed tones. Alexander noticed the strain in her eyes, but he chalked it up to pre-wedding nerves. Little did he know, she was on the brink of her own revelations, grappling with the knowledge of her secret lineage and how it might tear them apart. Manuel Ramirez, the kindly grandfather, did his best to soothe Liana, reminding her that sometimes destiny works in mysterious ways. The old man carried himself with a dignified elegance that belied his humble appearance. There were hints of sorrow in his eyes, and each time Liana glanced at him, they seemed to share an unspoken agreement that the truth, when it emerged, would change everything. On the day of the wedding, the estate was transformed into a realm of splendor. Orchids and lilies lined the pathways, while a string quartet played gentle, melodic tunes under the crisp autumn sun. Distinguished guests arrived by limousine, stepping onto red-carpeted walkways leading to the centuries-old chapel on the estate's grounds. Liana wore a gown of soft ivory satin, with sleeves that draped her arms gracefully. A single tear slipped down Alexander's cheek as she approached him at the altar. He believed he had never seen anyone more beautiful. Her trembling smile spoke volumes about her love, and also her deep-seated anxiety. As the officiant began the ceremony, a hush fell over the congregation, broken only by occasional clicks of photographers' cameras. Just as the couple was about to exchange vows, a dramatic interruption occurred. The chapel doors were flung open, and an imposing figure strode in, Santiago Beltran, flanked by two assistants. Gasps rippled through the pews as security guards rushed forward. But before they could escort him out, Santiago held up an official document and declared that he had come to stop the wedding. With unwavering confidence, he insisted that Liana was his long-lost niece, the rightful heir to a massive fortune and major stake in a worldwide shipping empire. Furthermore, he stated that she was promised in marriage, a strategic alliance with another powerful family. Shock reverberated through the chapel. Alexander glared, trying to piece together this unbelievable claim. Liana looked stricken, her carefully guarded secrets laid bare before the entire assembly. Josephine Caldwell, smirking in the back row, looked triumphant, as though her conspiracy theories had just been confirmed. Gerald Barnes watched in dismay, certain this was proof of a con. But the reality was far more complicated than any of them had imagined. In a trembling voice, Liana pleaded for calm. The entire congregation leaned in, breathless, as she explained the real story. She was born Liana Beltran, the daughter of Santiago's estranged brother, who had chosen a humble life of philanthropy and service in Colombia rather than remain part of the Beltran corporate dynasty. But tragedy struck when Liana's parents died in a plane crash, and she was left under the care of her grandfather, Manuel Ramirez, who changed both of their last names in fear that the powerful Beltran family might track them down and demand Liana's return to a life she did not want. Santiago's quest to find her was, on the surface, a show of familial concern, but Liana suspected ulterior motives. Her father had held a large share in the family's shipping empire, shares that were supposed to transfer to Liana upon her 25th birthday. If Liana married without the family's approval, it could jeopardize their carefully planned alliances and corporate expansions. She believed Santiago wanted to reclaim her stake for his own ambitions. Tearfully, she turned to Alexander. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted a marriage based on secrets. I only kept this from you because my parents wanted me to live a life free from the ruthless politics that destroyed our family. I never thought you would find me, and I never wanted your fortune. I only wanted your heart." The chapel fell into a stunned silence, except for Josephine's barely concealed glee. Gerald Barnes exchanged a troubled look with his son, uncertain how to respond. All eyes were on Alexander. Alexander was torn. Over the last month, he had poured his heart into Liana, convinced she was a modest woman from a poor village. Now, to learn that she was the heir to a shipping empire, possibly larger than his own family's holdings, threatened everything he had believed. Was their connection real, or had she orchestrated the entire charade? Yet as he looked into her tearful hazel eyes, the authenticity he'd always loved about her was still there. She had hidden her identity, yes, but her reasons, at least as far as he could tell, were grounded in fear and survival, not manipulation. Tension weighed heavily on every breath in the chapel. Santiago insisted that the wedding be nullified immediately. The union was not authorized by the Beltran clan. Turning to Liana, he demanded she return to Colombia with him. Liana stood firm. "I may be a Beltran by blood," she said, voice trembling, "but I'm also a Ramirez by choice. My parents gave up everything for a quieter life. I refuse to let you control my future, just because you're suddenly interested in your niece's share of the empire." Gerald Barnes, unexpectedly, intervened on Liana's behalf. "The ceremony may have been interrupted," he said, "but you won't threaten my son or his bride in our home." This was a rare show of paternal protectiveness from a man who had been, until that moment, her staunchest critic. Santiago bristled, but security now blocked his path, ensuring no further intrusion would occur inside the chapel. Despite the dramatic confrontation, Alexander signaled to the officiant to continue. Still trembling, Liana placed her hand in Alexander's, uncertain if he truly wanted to finalize the vows. In a move that stunned both families, he quietly affirmed, "I choose you, Liana, whatever your name may be, wherever you may come from." Taking a deep breath, he continued, "I want a marriage built on love and honesty. From this moment forward, no more secrets." A hush fell as their vows were spoken in soft, emotional tones. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the gathered crowd erupted into tentative applause, some from genuine happiness, others from shock and confusion. Santiago glowered, but he had no legal grounds to stop the union, especially in the United States. As the wedding party recessed down the aisle, it felt as though every step reverberated with the tension of unresolved conflict. That evening, the planned reception was overshadowed by the day's events. Half the guests were abuzz with speculation, while the other half quietly sipped champagne, uncertain how to act. Liana disappeared shortly after the ceremony, needing time and space to gather herself. Alexander, wanting to be near his new wife, found her sitting on a secluded balcony, overlooking the estate gardens. She stared into the night sky, tears drying on her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she murmured, voice heavy with guilt. "I never wanted to drag you into my family's drama." Alexander reached for her hand. "Perhaps," he said softly, "but it's our drama now." In the days following the wedding, Santiago Beltran made no secret of his intent to fight for Liana's share of the Beltran empire. He filed motions in Colombian courts, claiming that the marriage was illegitimate due to family pressure, and that Liana was mentally unfit to manage such a valuable inheritance. Liana, who had never cared about the fortune in the first place, was incensed by the intrusion into her private life, but she knew ignoring it would only give Santiago more power. Alexander, recognizing that the conflict went far beyond his personal sphere, pooled the resources of the Barnes conglomerate to support his wife's legal battle. Gerald Barnes, seeing Liana in a new light, also rallied his team of international lawyers, acknowledging that the Barnes family interest could be severely impacted if Liana lost her rightful claim. If that happened, Santiago might come after Alexander's assets under some twisted premise of business sabotage. While Liana and Alexander navigated these legal waters, they faced another challenge: the social backlash in Manhattan. Before the scandal, rumors had pegged Liana as a poor opportunist. Now, it seemed she was an heiress of a shipping empire. The tabloids reversed their narrative overnight, painting her as a cunning, possibly manipulative woman who had deceived everyone about her real identity. Invitations to high society gatherings carried polite disclaimers, and more than one gossip site peddled conspiracy theories that the Barnes and Beltran families were forging some powerful alliance behind closed doors. Liana tried to ignore the onslaught, focusing instead on philanthropic work. She wanted to demonstrate her parents' original vision, a life of service, far from the corporate games that had ruined her childhood. Yet her name, now tabloid fodder, followed her everywhere. Amidst the mounting tension, Alexander and Liana faced personal trials that tested the strength of their bond. Josephine Caldwell, still smarting from her romantic loss, attempted once more to drive a wedge between them. She leaked misleading documents, insinuating that Alexander's bank accounts were merged with Liana's under questionable circumstances, suggesting the marriage was a business ploy all along. These rumors led to a swirl of investigations by financial regulators, frivolous in nature, but devastating in terms of public perception. For the first time since the wedding, Alexander and Liana argued fiercely. Alexander was furious at the rumor mill, while Liana felt guilty for bringing such chaos into his life. Tensions flared. Words were said in anger, but eventually, they both realized they were fighting the wrong enemy. On one of the darkest nights of their young marriage, Liana decided she would sign over her entire inheritance from the Beltran side, walking away from the fortune if it meant preserving her relationship with Alexander. She met with an attorney behind closed doors to draft the necessary documents, wanting no part in a corporate empire that demanded her compliance at the cost of her happiness. But upon learning of her plan, Manuel Ramirez, her grandfather, stopped her. He reminded Liana of the philanthropic mission her parents had set out to accomplish with those very shares. They had wanted to use their wealth, not to buy influence, but to improve the lives of communities overlooked by political elites. If Liana abandoned that legacy, their dream would vanish. Torn between her love for Alexander and her desire to honor her parents, Liana felt paralyzed. In a surprising turn, Gerald Barnes and Liana's grandfather joined forces. Gerald, who had long believed Liana was a con artist, now realized she was a selfless woman saddled with an unwanted inheritance. Manuel, who had once hidden Liana from the Beltran family, recognized that she needed the Barnes' resources to protect herself, and that she also needed closure. Together, the two older men orchestrated a plan to meet with Santiago Beltran face to face. The meeting, fraught with tension, took place in a neutral location, a Colombian consulate in New York. Gerald Barnes, Manuel Ramirez, and Liana arrived with legal counsel. Alexander attended as well, refusing to let his wife stand alone. Across the table was Santiago, flanked by his own attorneys, posture rigid, eyes calculating. He insisted that Liana had no rightful claim, that she had abdicated her position in the Beltran family when she changed her name. But Gerald calmly pointed out that Liana was her father's sole surviving heir, and the legal documents filed by her parents before their death specified that their shares would pass to her on her 25th birthday, which had come and gone. Even if she wanted to forfeit them, the philanthropic trust set up by her late father could not be dissolved without a thorough court proceeding, and only if Liana, as the named beneficiary, agreed. This left Santiago with little room to maneuver. When Santiago turned his threats on Alexander, suggesting that this marriage was a strategic alliance to weaken Beltran shipping, Alexander finally reached his breaking point. He declared that he wanted no portion of the Beltran empire. All they wanted was for Liana to be free to choose her own life, and for her father's philanthropic trust to remain intact. If Santiago truly cared for his niece, he would honor her father's wishes rather than cling to corporate power. Tensions eventually simmered. Santiago found himself cornered by the clarity of the legal documents and the fierce determination of the Barnes family. Faced with an international media scandal that could tarnish his reputation, he begrudgingly agreed to a compromise. Liana would remain the legal heir to her father's shares, yet Santiago would be granted a seat on the philanthropic board, allowing him limited oversight. In exchange, he would publicly acknowledge her marriage to Alexander and cease any further attempts to contest it. The settlement put a stop to the litigation that had plagued Liana and Alexander's marriage from day one. It was far from a perfect resolution. Santiago's presence in her life was not exactly welcome, but it allowed Liana to fulfill her father's legacy. She could use those shares not for personal gain, but for social projects, community investments, and scholarships for underprivileged youth in Colombia and beyond. This was the life her parents had dreamed for her, a union of love and a mission of service. With the legal battles resolved, Liana and Alexander finally breathed a collective sigh of relief. They returned to San Rafael, Colombia, where villagers welcomed Liana like a returning hero, not because of her newfound status, but because they saw how she had remained true to her roots. Alexander felt an overwhelming sense of pride as he stood by her side, helping inaugurate a new educational center funded by the Philanthropic Trust. In that simple ceremony under the Andean sun, with school children clapping and singing songs of hope, Alexander finally understood what love truly meant. It was more than fancy galas and brand endorsements. It was more than forging alliances. Love was about sacrifice, understanding, and a shared vision of a better world. Gerald Barnes, observing the warmth between the couple, admitted privately to Manuel Ramirez that he had never expected this outcome. He was relieved that the rumors of Liana being a con artist were baseless, and even more impressed by her drive to honor her parents' philanthropic mission. As for Manuel, tears of happiness glistened in his eyes, knowing his beloved granddaughter had not only found love, but also embraced her destiny, without losing the purity of heart that defined her. Back in Manhattan, the tabloids shifted their narrative yet again. Headlines glorified the Cinderella story of Liana Beltran Ramirez, the hidden heiress who stole a millionaire's heart and launched a groundbreaking charitable venture. High society, fickle as ever, suddenly found Liana intriguing and sought her presence at exclusive events, this time to hail her as a philanthropic visionary. While Liana and Alexander did attend some functions to raise awareness for their causes, they largely ignored the superficial social climbing that had once sought to tear them apart. Josephine Caldwell slunk into the background, her attempts to sabotage the couple failing dramatically. She moved on to other social circles, leaving the Barnes family in peace. Santiago Beltran, for his part, worked closely with Liana in a professional capacity on the philanthropic board. Their relationship remained cool and formal, but the hostility subsided to a reluctant respect. Above all, the scandal that rocked their wedding day ended up fortifying Alexander and Leanna's bond. They found strength in adversity and unity in their shared purpose. The world might see them as a power couple combining two massive fortunes, but they knew the real story was about hearts uniting despite secrets, about forging a future rooted in compassion rather than corporate greed. As months turned into years, Alexander and Liana built a life grounded in trust and mutual support. The Barnes conglomerate adapted to include philanthropic collaborations and culturally conscious initiatives, driven largely by Liana's unwavering determination. Under her guidance, microfinance programs were launched in impoverished regions, aligning with her goal to uplift those in need without forcing them into dependency. Despite their busy schedule, they made time for quiet moments. Weekends were spent in the countryside, away from the intrusive gaze of paparazzi and the demands of high-level meetings. Occasionally, they returned to San Rafael, reuniting with old friends and neighbors. Alexander discovered an ever-growing appreciation for the simpler joys in life: a shared meal under the stars, an impromptu dance to local music, or the vibrant laughter of children running through the streets. In the end, Liana's true identity did change Alexander's life forever, but not in the way people assumed. It wasn't the money or the power that transformed him, but the revelation that his wife's origin spoke to a deeper integrity. She was a woman shaped by tragedy, courage, and love. She refused to let a name or a fortune define her. Through her, Alexander discovered the joy of authenticity, a quality he had once desperately sought while drowning in the superficialities of wealth. Standing on the balcony of their Manhattan penthouse, one reminiscent of Alexander's childhood home, but now filled with warmth rather than solitude, Liana and Alexander reflected on how far they had come. The city's dazzling skyline stretched out before them, a reminder of the power and privilege they wielded, but also of the responsibility they bore. In the end, Alexander said softly, "I never really knew who you were, and yet it was your soul I fell in love with, not the name Beltran." Liana smiled, resting her head on his shoulder. "I hope I've done my parents proud," she whispered, "and I hope I'll do right by you too." He kissed her temple, a gesture of gentle reassurance. "We'll figure it out together, every step of the way. United by love, shaped by secrets, and tested by forces larger than themselves." Alexander and Liana forged a legacy that transcended wealth and class. The story of the poor villager bride who turned out to be an heiress was plastered across society pages and sensationalized in tabloid headlines. But for those who truly knew them, the real story was a testament to the power of sincerity, resilience, and boundless devotion, an unbreakable bond that would endure through all twists of fate. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster of love, betrayal, and redemption. If you found Liana and Alexander's journey riveting, and the dramatic twists kept you on the edge of your seat, we invite you to become part of our storytelling family. Your support helps us continue creating enthralling tales that shine a light on the power of sincerity and the triumph of genuine love. Please hit the like button if this story touched your heart, and consider sharing it with friends who appreciate stories brimming with drama and unexpected revelations. And to never miss our newest drama-packed videos, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We promise you more inspiring journeys, unforgettable characters, and captivating narratives, each crafted to excite your imagination and remind you that true love can emerge from even the most unlikely of places.